The colony of New Dawn was humanity's dream written in stone and sky. It was more than a settlement, it was hope itself. Generations had looked at the stars and wondered if they would ever belong there. Earth had been scarred by wars and hunger, but humanity had survived. Now, on a faraway world with red grass and golden skies, humanity had planted its flag. New Dawn was the symbol of a second chance. Families had traveled across the void to live here. They built homes on alien soil, they sang songs under strange constellations, and they raised children who would never know the polluted skies of Earth. To them, New Dawn was paradise. It was proof that humanity could grow, not just on Earth, but across the galaxy. Children played by rivers of crystal blue water. Farmers grew crops in fields that shimmered beneath twin suns. Scientists studied the new ecosystem with wonder in their eyes. Every evening, when the twin suns dipped low, the colony gathered in the city square. They told stories of Earth, and they dreamed of futures far brighter than their past. Humanity believed it had finally found peace. But peace in the galaxy was fragile, and there were those who saw humanity's joy not as beauty, but as weakness. The attackers came without warning. It began with shadows in the sky. Children pointed to the horizon, thinking the dark shapes were new clouds or passing storms. Parents looked up and felt unease settle in their hearts. Then came the sound, the deep growl of engines that no one recognized. The colony's defenses were small. New Dawn was young, and its people had believed in promises of safety. The great empires of the galaxy had told humanity that their little colony was too far, too unimportant to be threatened. But those promises meant nothing when the sky split open with fire. The Zeroth Dominion had come. They were a race as old as war itself. Their ships were jagged and cruel, like floating blades tearing through the heavens. They believed that only the strong deserved to exist, and they saw humanity as nothing but vermin that had wandered too far into the stars. The first blast fell upon the central city. Towers of white stone cracked and fell like sand. Fire roared across the streets. Mothers clutched their children and ran, but there was nowhere to go. Every second brought new destruction. Homes were crushed into rubble. The marketplace burned. The rivers boiled. The sky itself seemed to scream. People tried to fight. A few small defense ships rose into the air, brave pilots guiding them with trembling hands. They fired, but their weapons barely scratched the armor of the Zeroth warships. One by one, the human ships fell, leaving streaks of fire as they crashed into the soil they had sworn to protect. Survivors fled into the forests, into caves, into the mountains. But the Zeroth hunted them down. To the Dominion, mercy was weakness. They had come to make an example, to show the galaxy what happened to those who dared to dream of freedom. The massacre lasted hours. One child, barely old enough to walk, clutched a broken toy in the ashes of his home. His father lifted him and tried to run, but a blast of fire consumed them both. An old woman, who had once been a teacher on Earth, gathered children into a cellar and sang to them as the walls shook. The children closed their eyes, clinging to her voice, until silence swallowed them forever. Every corner of New Dawn echoed with screams, then with silence, then with fire. When the attack was done, nothing was left. The Zeroth ships rose into the sky, leaving behind only smoke and ruin. The colony that had been humanity's hope was now a graveyard. But fate did not allow the Zeroth their full victory. A handful of survivors managed to escape. Their ships were broken, their bodies burned, their hearts heavy with grief, but they carried with them something the Zeroth did not expect. They carried memory. They carried witness. One small transport ship, its engines failing, broke through the blockade. Inside it were families, soldiers, scientists, all hollow-eyed and broken. They looked back at New Dawn, at the world that had been their home, and saw only fire. As the stars swallowed the ruined planet behind them, the survivors whispered promises to the dead. Promises that they would not forget. Promises that the galaxy would hear of this crime. Promises that humanity would answer. For every colony lost, humanity had always risen again. That was their nature. The Zeroth Dominion thought they had destroyed hope. But in truth, they had only lit a fire. And when humanity carried that fire back to Earth, it would grow into something the galaxy had never seen before. The survivors set their course for home. Their bodies trembled, their spirits shook, but in the silence of space, a single truth became clear. Annihilating humanity's colony was the beginning of the Zeroth's doom. Because humanity did not forgive. Humanity did not forget. Humanity struck back. The survivors of New Dawn traveled through the cold darkness of space for weeks. Their ship was damaged, its engines weak, its supplies running low. Every day was a fight against death. Inside the crowded vessel, the air was thick with grief. Some whispered the names of lost loved ones, while others sat in silence, unable to speak. Captain Renner, who commanded the transport, had been a farmer before the colony was built. She had never thought she would lead people in war or survival, but fate had forced her into both. Every time she looked at the faces around her, children with no parents, parents with no children, her heart hardened. She swore they would reach Earth. She swore the galaxy would hear what the Zeroth had done. At last, after endless nights and dying stars, Earth's blue glow appeared through the viewport. For the first time since the massacre, hope flickered inside the survivors. They had made it home. When the ship entered orbit, Earth's leaders rushed to greet them. Doctors carried the weak and the wounded, soldiers saluted the broken, and reporters gathered in silence, their cameras shaking as they filmed the hollow-eyed survivors. Then the truth was spoken. The Council of Earth gathered in a great chamber, its walls filled with leaders from every nation and colony. Survivors stood before them, their voices trembling as they told their story. They spoke of fire falling from the sky. They spoke of the Zeroth ships, dark and merciless. They spoke of families burned alive, of children buried in rubble, of the city of New Dawn turned into ash. The chamber was silent. Not because the story was unbelievable, but because it was too real. Everyone could see the scars on the survivors' faces. They could hear the cracks in their voices. They could feel the pain in every word. Some leaders wept openly. Others sat in stone silence, their hands clenched into fists. Soldiers in the room lowered their heads, as if ashamed they had not been there to fight. At last, High Chancellor Erin stood. His voice was steady, but his eyes burned. They destroyed our colony. They murdered our children. They believed we would bow. They believed we would break. They believed humanity would accept its death. He paused, then raised his voice so the whole chamber shook. But they do not know us. They do not know who we are. For every life they took, we will rise stronger. For every child they silenced, we will roar louder. Humanity does not die quietly. Humanity strikes back. The chamber erupted. Some shouted in grief, others in fury, but all were united. In that moment, humanity was no longer divided by borders, politics, or old scars. They were one people, bound by pain and by purpose. The Council sent a message across every human colony, every ship, every settlement among the stars. The message was simple. The Zeroth Dominion has killed our children. They burned New Dawn. Now we rise as one. Every hand, every mind, every soul is needed. The Armada must be built. Humanity will fight. The word spread like fire. Miners on the asteroid belts laid down their tools and swore to build ships. Engineers on Mars worked without rest, turning steel into war machines. Soldiers returned from retirement, some with grey hair and scars, ready to fight again. Even farmers and traders, who had never held a weapon, stood in recruitment lines, their eyes blazing with determination. The grief of New Dawn had become fuel. Across Earth's skies, factories thundered. Shipyards lit up the night as massive frames of battleships rose into orbit. The people named them after the fallen: Defiance, Iron Vow, New Dawn's Wrath. Every name carried memory. Every ship carried vengeance. Yet it was not only anger that filled humanity, it was love. Love for the ones they lost. Love for the homes that had burned. Love for the future that must be protected. That love gave them strength no empire could measure. The galaxy noticed. Alien merchants whispered in fear. Some laughed and said humanity would collapse under the weight of war. Others watched carefully, remembering the history of Earth, the endless wars, the resilience, the stubborn refusal to die. An old alien scholar, watching the news of Earth's rising fleets, told his students quietly, "You do not understand humans. They are not like us. When they mourn, they build. When they bleed, they grow stronger. And when you kill their children, they will never stop until you are broken." And so, the message spread not only among humans, but across the stars. The Zeroth Dominion had struck a match. They believed they had ended a species. Instead, they had awakened a storm. Back on Earth, Captain Renner stood on the balcony of the council hall, watching the first great battleship rise into the sky. Its engines burned bright, casting light over the city below. Around her, survivors of New Dawn stood in silence, their faces wet with tears. Renner whispered softly, though everyone near her heard. "This is for them. For the ones we lost. For the world that burned. The Zeroth thought they ended us. They will learn. Humanity does not fall. Humanity strikes back. The battleship vanished into the heavens, and the sound of its engines echoed like a promise. A promise of vengeance. A promise of justice. A promise of war. The story of New Dawn's destruction spread like a storm across the galaxy. It traveled faster than light, carried by traders, smugglers, diplomats, and spies. Everywhere, beings of countless races whispered the same thing. The humans have been struck. In the shining halls of wealthy empires, some scoffed. To them, humanity was still new, still small, still weak. The humans had dared to plant a colony far from their homeworld, and now they had paid the price. A merchant prince of the Carthan race laughed as he drank sweet nectar in his palace. Humans are fragile creatures, he sneered. They play at being great, but the stars do not belong to them. They will crawl back to their little planet and never dare again. His advisors nodded, but even among them, unease stirred. For deep in their memories, they had heard old stories. Stories of Earth's stubborn history, of a species that had clawed its way from caves to cities, from bows to starships, in a fraction of the time it had taken others. In the dark corners of lawless space, pirates whispered different words. "The humans are building," one said with a crooked grin. "Their shipyards blaze like suns. Their factories never sleep. They say every ship carries the names of the dead." Another pirate spat into the dirt. "Fools. They should stay silent. The Zeroth Dominion crushes all who resist. The humans will learn, just like the others." But even he spoke with doubt, for he too had heard of Earth's will. Far across the galaxy, on a world of glass towers and golden skies, an alien scholar stood before her students. She was old, her scales faded, her voice soft yet certain. News of New Dawn had reached her too, and her students looked at her with wide, curious eyes. "Teacher," one asked, "why do the humans matter? They are new to the stars. They have no great fleets. They have no ancient power. The Zeroth will erase them." The old scholar shook her head slowly. "You do not understand humans. No one truly does, not yet." She touched the star chart on the wall, her claw resting on the small blue dot of Earth. "Listen well," she said. "Humans are not like us. When we mourn, we fall silent. When we bleed, we hide. But when humans mourn, they build. When they bleed, they grow stronger. And when someone kills their children, she let the silence hang heavy. They do not rest until their enemy is ash." The students shivered. Meanwhile, in the heart of the Zeroth Dominion, the news of humanity's fury reached the throne of the High Overlord. His advisors spoke of human shipyards, of new fleets rising, of colonies uniting. The Overlord laughed, his voice like grinding stone. "Let them build. Let them rage. What can insects do against fire? We have crushed species older and greater. Humanity will be nothing but another example." But his generals were not as certain. Reports showed human fleets striking small Zeroth patrols, leaving behind ruins and messages carved into debris. "This is for New Dawn." At first, the Dominion dismissed these as accidents, as desperate raids. But the raids grew bolder. Each time, human ships disappeared into the void before the Zeroth could catch them. Each time, the message burned brighter across the stars. Humanity had begun to fight. The galaxy watched with widening eyes. Some cheered in secret, hoping the humans might weaken the Dominion that had oppressed them for generations. Others shook their heads, believing humanity was marching toward suicide. But all agreed on one thing. The humans were not acting like victims. They were acting like a storm. Back on Earth, whispers reached the ears of ordinary people too. Farmers heard of alien merchants who mocked them, saying humanity would collapse. Miners on distant asteroids heard of pirates who bet on their failure. Soldiers read reports of scholars who warned that humans would fight like no other race before them. Instead of breaking their spirit, these whispers only made humanity stronger. Every insult became fuel. Every doubt became fire. Every whisper of fear became a song of determination. In the great cities of Earth, murals appeared on walls, paintings of burning ships and rising fleets. Artists drew the children of New Dawn with wings of light, guiding the Armada into battle. Poets wrote verses that were recited in crowded squares. "They struck at our children. They struck at our future. But they will learn, we are not the weak. We are the storm that rises." The galaxy was beginning to sense it. Humanity was not simply preparing for war, they were becoming something more. Something the stars had never seen before. On a cold night in the capital of Earth, Captain Renner stood again on the balcony where she had once promised vengeance. Now, beside her, stood Commander Elara Hayes, one of the chosen leaders of the new Armada. The city below was alive with light. Factories roared. Ships rose into orbit. Music and voices filled the air. Renner looked at Hayes, her eyes still carrying the pain of new dawn. "Do you hear them?" she asked softly. Hayes nodded. "Yes. The galaxy whispers. They think we will fall." "And do you believe that?" Hayes' eyes hardened. "No. I believe the galaxy will soon learn what humanity truly is." They stood in silence, watching as another warship rose into the night. Its name, painted in white across its hull, shone like a star, Vengeance of Dawn. Earth was alive with fire and purpose. Shipyards stretched as far as the eye could see, their towers casting long shadows over the cities below. Steel roared into orbit, engines lit like blazing suns, and human hands worked tirelessly to build the Armada, a fleet that would carry humanity's vengeance across the stars. Every ship had a story. The smallest fighter bore the name of a child lost on New Dawn. The largest battleship, a floating fortress called the Eternal Resolve, carried the names of every family, every teacher, every mother and father who had perished in the flames. The hulls themselves were engraved with messages, promises that humanity would not forget. Engineers worked day and night. Old veterans returned to service, their hair grey but their spirits undiminished. Farmers, miners, and students, all who had once lived quiet lives, learned the language of war. They learned to weld, to pilot, to calculate trajectories of weapons that could shatter enemy fleets. Even children too young to fight carried messages to soldiers and whispered prayers for those who would die. The city squares were filled with families and survivors of New Dawn. They watched the ships rise and felt something they had not felt since the attack: hope. Hope was not quiet here, it was loud, strong, and burning. It was in every hammer strike, every blueprint drawn, every engine ignited. Captain Renner walked among the shipyards, inspecting each vessel. She touched the hulls with her hands and whispered to them, as if speaking to the souls of those they would avenge. "This is for you," she said, voice trembling. "We will not forget. We will not forgive. We will rise, and we will strike." The Eternal Resolve was the heart of the Armada. It was more than a ship, it was a city in space, capable of carrying thousands of soldiers, hundreds of fighter craft, and weapons that could break moons. Its command bridge gleamed, and inside, the human spirit burned brighter than any engine. The ship's AI, built with human ingenuity, was trained not only for war but to inspire courage in those who served aboard it. Pilots trained relentlessly. They flew simulations in zero gravity, in asteroid belts, under simulated enemy fire. Every maneuver was repeated until perfection became instinct. Veterans taught them, sharing tales of courage and sacrifice, reminding them that humanity's strength was not only in machines, but in heart. Families watched their sons and daughters train, sometimes with pride, sometimes with fear. Every human knew that war was coming, and that the price would be high. But there was no hesitation, no retreat. Humanity had chosen its path. Scientists worked alongside soldiers. They developed weapons that no alien had seen before. Cannons capable of piercing even the strongest armor. Shields that could withstand energy storms. AI-guided drones that acted as extensions of the human will. Every innovation was a message. Humanity was prepared, and they would not fail. And yet, despite the machines, the weapons, and the plans, it was emotion that truly forged the Armada. Grief turned into courage. Anger turned into strategy. Love for the lost gave humanity a power no calculations could measure. Every ship carried not only steel and energy, but memory and determination. On the final day before the Armada was set to depart, the survivors of New Dawn were brought together for a ceremony. Families who had been torn apart stood side by side with soldiers and engineers. Captain Renner addressed them all. "They said we were weak," she said, her voice carrying over the crowd. "They said we would crumble. They said that destroying New Dawn would silence us. But look at what we have done. Look at the Armada we have built. Every ship, every weapon, every pilot carries the spirit of our lost home. We rise not for conquest, not for glory, but for justice. We strike back because we must, because we cannot do otherwise." The crowd cheered, voices rising in one powerful wave. Children clutched model ships in their hands, dreaming of the day they would see humanity's strength shine among the stars. Soldiers saluted, tears streaming down their faces. Even the oldest veterans wiped sweat and dirt from their brows, feeling the fire of purpose once again. At night, the sky above Earth burned with the lights of departing fleets. The Armada slowly rose into orbit, engines igniting like stars being born. As they left, the planet below seemed to hold its breath. Humanity's voice echoed in every engine's roar. We will avenge New Dawn. We will protect our future. The Zeroth will learn that humanity cannot be broken. Commander Elara Hayes stood on the bridge of the Eternal Resolve, looking out at the countless ships rising behind them. Her hands rested on the rail, steady and sure. Beside her, Captain Renner's eyes glimmered with pride and sorrow. The galaxy has seen humanity's weakness, Hayes said softly. Now it will see our strength. Renner nodded. And the Zeroth will learn something they will never forget. The Armada jumped into space, leaving Earth behind, carrying the hopes, grief, and determination of an entire species. They were no longer settlers, no longer refugees. They were a force forged from fire and sorrow, a storm that would sweep across the stars. Every star they passed, every planet they approached, would know that humanity had risen. The Armada was humanity's answer to cruelty, to injustice, to the pain inflicted upon New Dawn. And so, the galaxy waited, unaware that it was about to witness the beginning of humanity's vengeance, a vengeance that would echo through the stars for generations to come. The Armada moved silently through the dark void of space, 1,000 ships united under a single purpose. The humans were no longer afraid. Every pilot, every soldier, every engineer carried the memory of New Dawn. Every heartbeat echoed with the promise, this is for them. Captain Renner stood on the bridge of the Iron Vow, watching the stars streak past. Her hands gripped the rail. Around her, the crew was tense but determined. There was fear, of course, it was human to fear, but it was controlled, shaped into a force stronger than steel. The target was a Zeroth Dominion outpost on the edge of their territory. It was heavily armed, a fortress among the stars. The Dominion believed it to be safe, secure from any human threat. They had been wrong before. Commander Elara Hayes spoke over the comms, her voice calm but sharp. All ships, maintain formation. Remember your training. Remember New Dawn. Strike together, strike hard, and leave nothing behind. The first wave of fighters leaped from the motherships like swarms of lightning. They darted toward the outpost, dodging orbital defenses and enemy patrols. The larger battleships followed, shields raised, cannons ready. The humans had planned every detail, predicted every move. Yet no plan could prepare them fully for the moment of truth, the instant they faced the enemy that had taken so much. When they arrived, the Zeroth forces were confident. Their weapons glinted in the void, their crews certain that the humans would break. But then, the human fleet unleashed its fury. Cannon fire lit the darkness, striking with precision and power. Fighters weaved through the enemy lines, striking vital points, evading destruction with skill born of desperation and practice. Explosions blossomed across the outpost, fiery flowers of war blooming in the black. The humans did not pause. They fought with purpose, each movement precise, each shot a message. On board the Iron Vow, Captain Renner watched the enemy falter. Her chest ached with grief and rage. Every blast reminded her of the children, the families, the laughter of New Dawn now silenced forever. And then came the signal. A single message carved into the ruins of the first destroyed turret, broadcast across the Dominion's channels. This is for New Dawn. The Zeroth Dominion faltered. They had faced countless species, but none had fought like this. None had struck with both cunning and passion. Humanity was not merely attacking, they were showing emotion, resolve, and intelligence woven together as a weapon. In the chaos, Captain Marlowe piloted his fighter through a collapsing corridor of enemy fire, risking everything to reach a supply station. He launched his payload directly into the heart of the outpost. The explosion was tremendous, shaking the hull of the human fleet as much as the enemy. When the smoke cleared, the outpost was gone. Marlowe's voice came over comms, calm despite the adrenaline. For New Dawn. The human fleet retreated with precision, leaving behind only the ruined fortress and the message. Not a single human ship was lost to carelessness, though several bore scars from close calls. They had shown strength, courage, and the will to survive. Back in the Dominion, the leaders were furious. They could not believe what they had seen. How could this small, new species strike so effectively? How could they survive against the Dominion's power? Reports flooded the Overlord's chambers. One after another, commanders admitted their losses. One ship, a flagship, had been reduced to nothing. The Zeroth Dominion had underestimated humanity, and it had cost them dearly. In the human fleet, There was no celebration, only silent acknowledgement of what had been achieved. Every soldier knew this was only the beginning. The attack had been a message, not just to the Zeroth, but to the galaxy. Humanity was no longer defenseless. Humanity would fight. Humanity would avenge New Dawn. Captain Renner spoke to her crew quietly. This is only the start. We fight not for glory, but for justice. Every step we take, every battle we win, honors the memory of those we lost. Never forget them. Never forget New Dawn. The words were not just command, they were promise, prayer, and declaration all at once. Every human aboard the fleet felt it in their bones, their hearts, their very souls. As the fleet jumped into hyperspace to regroup, Commander Hayes looked out at the stars, now dotted with the wreckage of the Dominion's outpost. They will remember this, she said softly. They will fear humanity now. And rightly so. Renner nodded, her eyes distant. They destroyed our home. But we will rise. They think they are strong. They do not know what we carry inside us. And they will learn. The first strike was over, but the war had only begun. Humanity had taken its first step into vengeance, and the galaxy would never see them the same way again. Because when humans fight for those they love, they do not simply battle, they become a force of nature. And the Zeroth Dominion had just begun to face a storm they could not stop. The war spread like wildfire across the stars. Humanity's Armada had struck the first blow, but the Zeroth Dominion was furious, and their retaliation was brutal. Entire star systems became battlefields. The skies of distant colonies were filled with fire and smoke. Ships of all sizes tore through space, leaving trails of destruction in their wake. Captain Marlowe, now a legend among human pilots, led a squadron in the Outer Rim. His ship, battered but unbroken, darted through enemy fire with skill born of desperation and courage. He was fearless, not because he did not feel fear, but because he refused to let it control him. Every maneuver, every shot he fired carried the weight of New Dawn's ashes. In one battle, a Zeroth cruiser unleashed a storm of energy beams. Marlowe's squadron wove through the assault, but the ship beside him exploded, its crew lost in a flash of fire. He felt the sting of grief but pushed it aside. He had no time to mourn. The enemy was relentless, and humanity's survival depended on every second. Meanwhile, Commander Ilara Hayes coordinated the larger fleet. From the bridge of the Eternal Resolve, she issued orders with calm precision, her voice steady despite the chaos. Ships swarmed around her, shields raised, weapons primed, engines roaring. "Do not falter," she commanded. "Do not give them an inch. Remember New Dawn. Fight for every life they took. Fight for every child who will never grow up there." Her words reached every ship, every pilot, every soldier. Humanity fought not as individuals, but as one living, breathing entity. Their unity was their strength. Their courage was unstoppable. The battles were costly. Ships fell, crews were lost, and space itself seemed to cry with the explosions. But for every loss, humanity struck back harder. They learned, adapted, and grew stronger. Every battle was a lesson, every scar a reminder of what they were fighting for. On the Iron Vow, Captain Renner guided her vessel through a narrow asteroid field, dodging enemy fire while protecting a convoy of refugees. Her hands moved with practiced precision. Behind her, soldiers whispered prayers for survival. The ship shook as a missile struck near the hull, but it held. Humanity's ships were not merely machines, they were extensions of their will, crafted from determination and memory. And then came the moment that would be remembered for generations. Marlowe, seeing a Zeroth flagship attempting to escape with vital supplies, made a choice. His ship was damaged, barely holding together, but he knew what he had to do. With a steady voice over comms, he shouted, "For New Dawn," and steered his vessel directly into the enemy cruiser. The collision was massive. The enemy ship erupted in fire, sending fragments into the void. Marlowe's name became legend, a symbol of courage and sacrifice. Stories like his spread throughout the fleet. Pilots, soldiers, and civilians alike told of bravery, of small victories in the face of overwhelming odds. Each tale became fuel for the human spirit. They fought not only to win, but to honor those who had died, to prove that humanity could not be broken. The Zeroth Dominion began to realize they had underestimated humanity. Every attack they launched was met with unexpected strategy, every ambush with relentless courage. Humanity had learned quickly, and they were not just surviving, they were thriving in the crucible of war. In quiet moments, between battles, the survivors of New Dawn whispered the names of their lost families. They held photographs, trinkets, letters, and memories close to their hearts. These were their secret weapons, the reason they never gave up. They fought not just for victory, but for love, grief, hope, and vengeance intertwined. On Earth, people watched the news from the front lines. Families cheered for pilots and soldiers they had never met. Murals appeared on city walls, depicting human ships breaking through alien fleets. Children drew pictures of heroes like Marlowe, imagining themselves soaring among the stars, carrying justice to the Zeroth. Humanity's courage inspired generations, even in the midst of the darkest war. Commander Hayes, standing on the Eternal Resolve, looked at the stars, now scarred with smoke and fire. Her heart ached for every loss, but she also felt pride unlike any she had known. "They thought humanity would break," she whispered. "They do not understand us. And they never will." Every day, every battle, every sacrifice brought humanity closer to their goal. They were no longer the newcomers of the galaxy. They were a force to be reckoned with, a storm of courage, skill, and unbreakable spirit. And through it all, one truth became clear to the Zeroth Dominion: destroying New Dawn had been their greatest mistake. In annihilating the colony, they had awakened a force unlike any they had ever faced. Humanity did not bow, humanity did not hide, humanity did not fear. Humanity struck back, and the galaxy would never forget it. The war was far from over, but one thing was certain: humanity had risen. They had taken the first steps toward vengeance, and their hearts burned brighter than any weapon. The survivors of New Dawn, now scattered among the fleet, watched the battles from their stations. Every explosion of enemy fire was a reminder of what had been lost, and every victory was a promise of what was to come. Humanity would not stop. Humanity would not falter. Humanity would see justice done. And in the endless dark of space, humanity's fire shone. The galaxy held its breath. The Battle of Kale's Rift was about to begin, a confrontation unlike any humanity had faced before. The Zeroth Dominion had gathered its greatest fleet, an ocean of warships designed to crush the human armada once and for all. They believed this would be the end of humanity. They were wrong. Captain Renner stood on the bridge of the Iron Vow, her eyes fixed on the stars ahead. Every human pilot, every soldier, every crew member felt the same mixture of fear and determination. They were about to face a storm, and they knew some would not survive. But humanity had never fled when faced with impossible odds. Commander Elara Hayes stood beside Renner on the bridge of the Eternal Resolve. Her eyes scanned the fleet, thousands of ships ready for battle, every hull etched with names, every weapon loaded with vengeance. "Today," she said softly, "we fight for every soul lost at New Dawn. For every family torn apart. For our future. There is no retreat. There is no surrender. Today, we fight." The human fleet surged forward. Fighters darted like sparks, battleships thundered behind them, and the Eternal Resolve led the charge, a beacon of hope and fury. The rift itself, a massive region of dense asteroids and radiation, shimmered ahead, casting eerie lights across the approaching fleets. The Zeroth Dominion struck first. Energy beams tore through space, obliterating smaller human ships. Explosions flared, turning darkness into a battlefield of fire and debris. Yet humanity did not waver. Pilots dodged, weaved, and returned fire with precision. Every ship moved as if guided by a single mind, a single purpose. Captain Marlowe, leading a squadron of fighters, flew with unmatched bravery. His voice crackled over comms, rallying his squad: "Remember New Dawn. Strike now, strike hard." They weaved through the enemy, striking critical points. One by one, Zeroth vessels fell, torn apart by a combination of skill and fury. The battle was immense. Asteroids exploded as ships collided, energy beams carved paths through the void, and the rift itself shook with the violence of war. Humanity was facing annihilation, but they turned desperation into strength. Every move, every shot, every sacrifice was a statement. They would not be broken. In the heart of the battle, Commander Hayes spotted the Zeroth flagship, the nerve center of the Dominion fleet. Its shields were nearly impenetrable, its weapons deadly. But the humans had a plan. Coordinating through comms, squadrons converged on the flagship, drawing its attention, while battleships targeted weak points identified by their AI. Captain Renner gave the final order: "All units, focus fire. For New Dawn. For Earth. For humanity." Cannons roared. Fighters launched missile volleys. The flagship shook under the concentrated assault. The Zeroth Dominion had never faced such relentless coordination, such fearless courage. The human fleet moved as one, a living storm of metal, fire, and resolve. Marlowe led the final strike. His ship dove through a storm of fire, weaving between beams and explosions. With a steady hand, he launched a payload directly at the flagship's core. The explosion rocked space, sending shockwaves that threw nearby ships off balance. Fire and metal rained down. The flagship shuddered, its defenses failing. On board the Eternal Resolve, Hayes watched with her heart pounding. "Hold them! Hold them!" she shouted. Every human ship pressed forward, taking advantage of the chaos. The Dominion fleet faltered, their confidence shattered. The turning point had come. Humanity's bravery, coordination, and unwavering spirit were unstoppable. The rift glowed with fire and destruction as the Zeroth flagship began to crumble. One by one, their warships retreated or were destroyed. When the smoke cleared, the battlefield was a scar across the stars. The human fleet had won, though at a cost. Ships were damaged, crews were lost, and silence hung heavy over the survivors. But the victory was undeniable. Humanity had shown that they could face overwhelming odds and emerge triumphant. Commander Hayes stood on the deck of the Eternal Resolve, looking at the wreckage. Her eyes were wet with tears, both for the lives lost and for the triumph achieved. "We have done it," she whispered. "We have made them pay. We have shown them that humanity does not bow." Captain Renner placed a hand on her shoulder. "They thought destroying New Dawn would end us. But we are stronger than they imagined. And this is only the beginning." Throughout the galaxy, word of the victory spread. The Zeroth Dominion was shaken to its core. They had underestimated humanity's courage, ingenuity, and unbreakable spirit. Their empire, once confident, now trembled at the realization that humanity would not be defeated easily. The survivors of New Dawn, scattered across the fleet, gathered together and whispered the names of their lost loved ones. They lit candles and looked at the stars, knowing that each victory carried their memory forward. Humanity had risen, not just as warriors, but as a force of hope, justice, and vengeance. And in that moment, the galaxy understood something it had never known before. When humans fight for what they love, when they strike for those they have lost, they do not simply fight, they become a storm that no power can stop. The Battle of Kale's Rift would be remembered forever. It was the moment humanity declared that they were no longer newcomers. They were a force to be reckoned with. And the Zeroth Dominion had learned, too late, that annihilating humanity's colony had sealed their own doom. The Armada regrouped among the stars, battered but victorious, their hearts still burning with the fire of New Dawn. Humanity's vengeance had begun, and the galaxy would never forget their wrath. The Zeroth Dominion had underestimated humanity. They had believed that annihilating New Dawn would break the human spirit. They had been wrong. Across the stars, the Armada surged forward, a wave of fire, steel, and unyielding determination. Humanity did not retreat. Humanity did not falter. Humanity struck back. Captain Renner stood on the bridge of the Iron Vow, her eyes fixed on the looming Zeroth stronghold at Valora Prime. This was the heart of the Dominion's war machine, the place from which the attacks on humanity had been orchestrated. It was heavily defended, shielded by hundreds of warships and planetary cannons. Yet Renner felt no fear, only resolve. Every face in her crew reflected the same determination. They carried the memories of New Dawn in their hearts. Commander Elara Hayes spoke over the comms, addressing the entire Armada. "This is it. Every weapon, every ship, every human soul, strike together. We fight for the fallen. We fight for our future. We fight for humanity." The Armada surged forward. Fighters darted like flares across the darkness, dodging beams of energy and missiles. Battleships thundered behind, shields blazing and cannons roaring. Each attack was precise, each maneuver a testament to the training, skill, and courage of humanity. On the front lines, Captain Marlowe led his squadron into the fray. His ship weaved through enemy fire with unmatched skill, striking at key command vessels. His voice echoed over comms, steady and fearless, "For New Dawn. For Earth. Strike with all you have." Explosions lit the sky above Valora Prime, sending debris hurtling into space. The Zeroth Dominion fought back with desperation, but they had learned the hard truth: humans did not fight like other species. Humans fought with memory, with grief, and with love. Every life they lost fueled the fury of the living. Every strike they delivered carried a message etched in fire. "We will never bow. We will never break. We strike for those you destroyed." The battle raged for hours, and yet humanity pressed forward. Pilots executed daring maneuvers, soldiers fought tirelessly aboard massive ships, and engineers patched damage in the heart of combat. The Zeroth Dominion could not withstand the relentless assault. In a daring move, Captain Renner led a strike team directly toward the central command tower of Valora Prime. Missiles tore through defensive shields, and fighters swarmed the platform. The heart of the Dominion's power was under siege. Inside the command tower, the High Overlord watched the destruction unfold. His fleet was collapsing, his ships burning, and humanity's Armada had breached the final defenses. Rage and disbelief twisted his features. How is this possible?" he hissed. His generals could only shake their heads. Humanity had grown stronger, faster, and more cunning than they had ever imagined. On the bridge of the Iron Vow, Renner's hands were steady. "Fire everything," she ordered. "For New Dawn." Cannons unleashed a storm of energy that shattered the command tower. Explosions rolled across the surface of Valora Prime, sending shockwaves into orbit. The flagship of the Zeroth Dominion, its weapons now useless, erupted into flames. Captain Marlowe, witnessing the destruction, whispered over the comms, voice trembling but proud, "It's done. New Dawn is avenged." Commander Hayes looked at the devastation, tears streaming down her face. She thought of the children who would never grow up, the families who had perished, the homes that had been reduced to ashes. And yet, she also felt the pride of a people who had refused to bow, who had taken their grief and turned it into power. The Zeroth Dominion was broken. Its forces scattered, its command structure destroyed, its arrogance shattered. Humanity had risen not as a mere species, but as a storm across the galaxy. On Earth, news of the victory spread. People wept, laughed, and cheered all at once. Murals were painted, songs were sung, and stories of bravery and sacrifice were told to every child. Humanity had survived the impossible, and they had done so together. Captain Renner addressed the fleet one last time, her voice carrying over every comms channel. The Zeroth Dominion thought they could destroy us. They thought ending New Dawn would silence humanity. But they were wrong. We are stronger than they imagined. We are united. We are unbroken. And we will protect our future. This is humanity. This is who we are. The Armada cheered, a sound that echoed across the stars. Pilots saluted, soldiers embraced, and survivors of New Dawn whispered prayers of gratitude to the fallen. Humanity had struck back, and they had won. As the fleet returned to Earth, the stars seemed brighter, as if acknowledging the courage of a species that refused to die quietly. Humanity had risen from the ashes of tragedy and shown the galaxy the true power of heart, courage, and unity. And somewhere in the ruins of Valora Prime, the remaining Zeroth forces trembled, remembering the day they annihilated a colony and awakened a storm. Humanity would not forget, humanity would not forgive, and humanity would never be defeated. The Armada entered Earth's orbit, battered but triumphant. Families reunited, children hugged the soldiers, and survivors of New Dawn finally allowed themselves to hope. Humanity had endured. Humanity had avenged. Humanity had struck back. And across the galaxy, the name of New Dawn lived on, not as a memory of sorrow, but as a symbol of humanity's unbreakable spirit.